All right, so let's start recording. It's already started. Today is the kind of day when you understand the importance of discipline. So, from the past few days, I'm making these videos where I'm, reading a particular book. So, I completed one chapter at a time. I did that day before yesterday, and then I did it yesterday as well. And I'm making a video about it and I'm posting it on my YouTube channel. Right, so if it is going to so that it will be helpful for the people who are into trading and also to the people who are living in general, because we are talking about the psychology in general, like how exactly it works and what are the things that we can do to make the best out of it, make the best out of the external environment by improving the internal environment. So whatever you're seeking outside is the result of how you perceive things. The same scenario can be perceived by different people in a different manner. So I'm not exactly remembering the quote by Mr. Sushant Singh Rajput, but in an interview, somebody asked to him about what is your opinion when it comes to the classic example of the glass is half full or half empty. So then he gave a lot of perspective around it. He said it can vary, it can depend on the person. Someone is looking at the glass and feeling, okay, I'm thirsty, I can, quench my thirst with the help of this water present inside the glass. Someone is looking at the reflection of light that is happening because of the water inside the glass. Someone is looking at the glass from some other perspective. So it's not like there are only two ways to look at the glass. So what I'm trying to make out of it is there are n number of ways to perceive the same scenario, and all you have to do is channelize your energy in the right direction so that you can get the best out of the whatever situation, whatever the external environment you are in. Okay, so let's start with the chapter 13. Today we are going to talk about managing mental energy. Now, when it comes to mental energy, yesterday what we have covered, let me give you a brief summary of it. So yesterday we covered this particular chapter where we talked about the dynamics of goal achievement, where we understood how the internal environment is affecting the outer environment, and we made some brief notes about it as well. So if you need it, you can just text it, or like you can just comment it right away, and it'll be like as soon as I'll look into the comment, I'll share you the insights that I made while going through the chapter. Okay, so what I basically do is I just read. I just simply read the chapter, and whenever I feel like I have to talk about certain things or certain explanation is required, I'll do it. So basically, in this video, you are going to read the chapter along with me, right? So it is one of those kind of videos. Now, chapter 13, managing mental energy. What do I mean by managing mental energy? So this is a book by Mark Douglas, and we are in the 30th chapter. So I completed 10th chapter, and from the 11th chapter onwards, I made videos, and this is the third video on this particular book that I'm making. So in each video, I'm covering one chapter. Like I'm going through it, and along with me, you are also going through it. It is more like that, okay? What do I mean by managing mental energy? You ask. There are many ways that we already manage mental energy, but probably won't think of it in such a way. For example, isn't it possible to take what starts out to be slight emotional wound, like some minor insult, and intensify the emotional energy behind that wound to the point where we could end up in a state of emotional frenzy? Yeah, it happens, right? We have all come across these situation, I guess, but I can only relate to my example. So yeah, I have been there. I have done that. So how do we accomplish this? By our willingness to think about whatever caused us to feel insulted. Our thoughts can add energy to or distract energy from the wound, depending on what kind of thoughts we choose to think. If we think destructive thoughts, we will be adding negatively energy to intensify the wound. And it goes without saying that we can carry this to whatever extreme we choose, and furthermore stop whenever we choose or whenever we are willing to. However, stopping does become more difficult in direct proportion to the amount of energy involved. Aren't we, in effect, managing or manipulating mental energy when we purposefully make ourselves more angry than when we started? out by channeling negative thoughts through an experience. By the same token, if we think positive thoughts, we will detract emotional energy from the wound. I'm sure anyone reading this book has noticed that when a person wants to stay angry, he will refuse to listen to anything that might diffuse his anger. When we refuse to listen to the voice of a reason, so to speak, we are making a choice not to manage mental energy, right? So the only reason why an angry person has to shut out the voice of reason is because he knows the information has the potential to change the way he feels. He knows that if he changes his perspective, which will in turn change the way he feels, he will experience a different environment on the outside. If he isn't willing to change, regardless of what the benefits may be, he'll refuse to use his thoughts in a way that would allow him to experience those benefits. These examples are just a few of many ways in which we already manipulate our mental environment to suit our purpose based on our willingness to do so. Certainly, if it is possible to manage mental energy for destructive purposes, it must also be possible to manage it for constructive purposes. Right? In the beginning itself, I said it is about channelizing the energy. Now, the key concept here are willingness and purpose. The willingness is to consciously direct our thought toward a specific intent to change something on the inside that isn't useful. Thoughts are a very powerful tool to effect changes in the mental environment. We can use them to sift, rearrange, add to, detract from, or change the polarity of various mental components. Thoughts are a form of energy, probably no different from electricity or light. They can act as a cause to produce some effect in the physical environment, as when we speak our thoughts, for example, as well as act as a cause to produce an effect in the mental environment. When we use our thoughts directly inward, we are basically using one form of energy as a tool to change the consistency and makeup of another form of energy, like using our thoughts to change a belief or release the negative energy out of a painful memory. It is precisely because of the inherent power within thoughts that people are so protective of themselves with the kind of information other people's thought expressed physically they will expose themselves to. Okay, I got zoned out in between, so let me go through it once again. Thoughts are a very powerful tool to effect changes in the mental environment. We can use them to shift, rearrange, add to, distract, detract from, or change the polarity of various mental components. Thoughts are a form of energy, probably no different from electricity or light. They can act as a cause to produce some effect in the physical environment, as when we speak our thoughts, for example, as well as act as a cause to produce an effect in the mental environment. When we use our thoughts directed inward, we are basically using one form of energy as a tool to change the consistency and makeup of another form of energy, like using our thoughts to change a belief or release the negative energy out of a painful memory. It is precisely because of the inherent power within thoughts that people are protective of themselves with the kind of information other people's thoughts expressed physically. They'll expose themselves to. Everyone instinctively knows that if we allow ourselves to think about something, we thoughts the thoughts have the power to change the way things exist inside of us. And once things change on the inside, we know we will perceive and experience a different outside. If we don't want to disturb the current relationship between inner and outer, we'll consciously do whatever is necessary to make sure that we don't expose ourselves to anything that might threaten the relationship or think about anything in a way that would change the relationship. Change is the result of first a willingness to think. Personally, I believe that if we weren't meant to keep and growing mentally, adding to who we are by transcending what we have already learned. And furthermore, if we weren't meant to direct that growth at a conscious level, then we would not have been given the ability to think, reason, and create. Implied within our ability to think, reason, and create is the inherent capability to learn our way out of the painful situation and dissatisfying life cycles in which we find ourselves. Painful life cycles begin with and perpetuated by painful memories. So, in essence, what I am stating is that inherent within our ability to think and reason is the capability to heal our emotional wounds so that we can perceive what is available from the environment beyond our fears. Healing emotional wounds is something that we have to learn how to do by learning. how to manage mental energy. Learning how to forget our painful memories by making them subconscious does not in any way reduce their significance on our perception of environmental information or their potential to cause us to behave in a certain ways. This is the gift of creativity that we are all born with. It is the capability to think beyond what our current beliefs, memories, and association would dictate as being true about the environment. The capability to reason beyond our current set of limitations, beliefs, painful memories, and erroneous, erroneous association or use our imagination creatively is the one compensating force that allows us to grow, improve, and evolve beyond the painful and destructive life cycles that we get caught in both as individuals and as a culture. However, there is something here that you may need to be mindful of. A capability to do something is not necessarily an ability to do something. Before a capability becomes an ability, it has to be cultivated into a skill. For example, we can use our imagination to visualize and then project it into the environment, the fulfillment of some need or goal in some future moment. But that doesn't mean we are using our imagination creatively. We may just be using our imagination to project what is already in our memories or what we already believe. The same is true for our thoughts. Most of the time they will originate out of our current set of beliefs and memories, so that what we will be thinking will correspond with the with the status quo, right? To create a more satisfying future for ourselves, we need to be able to imagine this future and project it out into the environment as some future moment. There is a direct correlation between what we project and what is already inside of us, unless, of course, we are imagining something beyond what we already know. The real, the only real limitations that exist with respect to thoughts are those rules that were either taught to us or the ones we made up for ourselves. We are not in any way restricted to just thinking about what we already believes is true or what we have already experienced. We are free to roam anywhere in our thoughts to explore any number of possibilities and choose to act on one of them, regardless of whatever is inside or outside of the current set of rules from which we operate, even to the point of using our thoughts to change any rules that we may have that says we can't. If we weren't meant to direct our own changes by thinking about how we might learn how to lead happier and more satisfying lives, then thinking, reasoning, and creatively wouldn't exist. To experience the same kind of painful condition over and over again in an environment that is in constant motion implies that we don't perceive any other choices or as being able available that would result in more satisfying outcomes. What we perceive is directly connected to what we already know. To perceive other choices other than the ones our beliefs, memories, and associations lock us into, we have to know something we haven't learned yet. So, learning our way out of a situation that is perpetually dissatisfying requires that we be open to thinking beyond what we already know. The environment will always offer us an opportunity for some degree of love, harmony, happiness, and success, or some degree of despair, disappointment, anger, hate, and betrayal. What we end up with from each of these moments has to be a reflection of what is inside of us, because the environment does not interpret the information it has to offer in any given moment. The process happen exclusively in each one of us. Remember the free money example in chapter 10? The reality of pleasure existed right along with the reality of indifference or fear. The man was there to give money to anyone who wanted. How each person interpreted the data determined what reality they experience. Creativity is synonymous with growth and change. Doesn't the word create imply bring into existence something that did not previously exist, that is already existed? If it already existed, then it would have already been created. To use our imagination creatively, we must to be willing to think outside of what we already know to be true or possible. For those of you who are not that familiar with various forms of creating energy, you would be surprised how just the willingness to uh, question the usefulness of something inside of us will bring forth an avalanche of inspiring alternatives. Otherwise, our memories and beliefs will cause us to think of the future in ways that directly correspond with our past. Thus, having the effect of locking us into the same recurring experiences. The names and places may change, but the situation and circumstances and conditions always remain the same because we aren't changing our mental framework to perceive anything different. Necessity is the mother of invention. In other words, the need to create some new machine, device, or process to save time, save money, or make money isn't any different from the need to create a new you, to experience success and a more satisfying life. The need will act as a force behind our thoughts to think beyond our current barriers so that we can expand. The barriers that act as a resisting force preventing us from expanding consist of many of our beliefs and all our painful memories. So we need a force to counteract and penetrate those barriers. That force is our thoughts and our willingness to use them in creative ways, right? Okay, just give me one moment. Let me just do it better, the setup and everything. Mm, right. Hmm. Now, let me just do one thing. I'll have to open the PPT, right? So that if I'll feel like something is important, I'll make a note of it. I'll simply copy paste that. Chapter 13. Hmm. Just stay with me, people. I'm just, making a PPT. I'm just trying to make a short note or something so that I can copy paste whatever the information or whatever the important things that I want to make a note of it. So I'll simply copy paste it, right? So it'll take less time rather than just writing it manually, which also gives another experience, and that is a whole different thing. But yeah, I can copy paste it. Oh, what happened? Here's my screen, man. Do I need to share again? Let's share again. Now it is fine. Okay. That force is our thoughts and our willingness to use them in creative manners. As our lives would become a lot easier to live and potentially more satisfying if we operated out of the belief that we are in a state of imperfect knowledge, evolving towards something that we haven't become yet. Everything is evolving into something that it isn't yet. It may not seem like it at times, but each moment of each day we change into someone who was not the person we were a moment ago. At the physical level, new cells are born and old cell dies, and the mental level, each moment that passes, we experience something. Each experience adds to the inner environment in the form of memory or belief. Each memory and belief builds a self concept that acts as a force on how we interact with the environment. Then, as we interact with the environment, we change it in some ways, creating a new environment for us to discover and experience. Everything that exists is evolving because everything that exists is in motion, and motion creates change. Even the grandest mountain will eventually wear away into small rocks, which will themselves turn into sand and then dust. However, the main point here is that implied within the concept of evolution, where we are in a state of imperfect knowledge, is a view that mistakes don't exist. Mistakes just point the way or to something that we haven't learned yet and obviously need to know. Okay. Hmm. Okay, why I'm not able to paste it, man? Hmm. Let's just simply Control C and Control V. Yes, it's fine now. So basically, it gives the idea about mistakes. What are mistakes? Mistakes are just point the way, they just point the way to something that we haven't learned yet. The obvious need. Okay, I have to change the color. Man. Hmm, obviously, need to know. We haven't learned yet, and obviously, we need to know. That's are just mistakes, right? So don't be afraid of mistakes. Never waste a good failure. I heard it somewhere in, in an Spotify ad. In a Spotify ad. Okay, so moving ahead, mistakes just point the way of to something that we haven't learned yet, and obviously need to know what exactly is a mistake anyway. We certainly weren't born with a concept of definition of what a mistake is. If left alone, all children will naturally keep on interacting with the environment to satisfy their own inner needs to learn and grow until they start to learn that what they are doing isn't quite up to the standards set by the people who are watching them. And all children just love to be watched. The criteria that we use for how we define a mistake is something that we had to learn from someone. In other words, our parents and teachers pass their definition on to us. These definitions would represent the mental framework for their unresolved painful experiences and what they themselves haven't learned about as being available from the environment beyond their pain. In other words, we pass on our ignorance as well as our wisdom without knowing at the time the difference between the two. And what was passed on that was dysfunctional will be regarded as the truth, just the same as the wisdom. When we as adults instill in our children our rigid definition of what constitutes a mistake, thinking that what we are going to do is save them. All we are really doing is perpetuating our pain in the next generation. A mistake isn't resolved until we evolve in our understanding to the point where we can garner the insight that is available from the experience. Okay, so we know the mistake and how can we overcome it? Then this is the way. Like you have to experience something out of something, then only you'll be able to do it. A mistake isn't resolved until we resolve in our understanding to the point where we can garner the insight that is available from the experience. Nice. When that point is reached, what we experience is no longer a mistake or painful because of what we have learned. However, until that point is reached, if ever, we feel compelled to save others from the painful lessons of a mistake, even to the point of beating it into them for their own good, of course, by using pain, either emotional or physical, as a means to save others from our mistakes. In fact, in effect, what we are really doing is creating a cycle of fear. We ensure that our limited level of understanding and insight will be maintained in them because fear is a contracting force that stifles the learning process. In a very real way, we inflict the pain of our unresolved mistakes on our children, just as our parents inflicted the pain of their unresolved mistake on us. And it goes on generation after generation until someone decides to use their creative powers to break the cycle. Nice. To operate out of this belief is in evolution so that we can naturally learn from the choices that we make. We have to first change our definition of what constitutes a mistake. It is precisely these kind of beliefs that act as a mental blocks to perceive a more satisfying way of living. Mistakes are virtually synonymous with pain. We can find any number of ways to avoid acknowledging a mistake so we don't have to confront the pain, and in the process we cut ourselves off from what we need to know to grow, expand and improve our lives. Nice. And that's wrong. Like this is how I can summarize my life in a nutshell. That's what I did. Wherever I felt like I'll get caught and I have committed some mistake, I try to, you know, hide it in one way or another. Even when we make a mistake where we supposedly knew better. If we really knew better, then we wouldn't have made the choices that we did that resulted in an outcome we define as a mistake. So we can assume that there is something inside of us that conflicts with our better judgment that has more power to influence our behavior. It isn't any less possible to change our definition of what constitutes a mistake than it is to intensify the emotional energy behind and result as in the example. To change these definition requires learning some techniques in mental energy management to de-energize or draw the negatively charged energy out of them. By doing so, we will allow ourselves to learn from all our experiences instead of hiding from them, feeling pain or punishing ourselves in some way without the effects of these self defeating definitions of mistakes. It is much easier to objectively monitor our progress towards the fulfillment of some goal. If we find our behavior inconsistent with the step to achieving our goals, it would tell us that our beliefs are not in harmony with those steps or the goals itself, or that we don't have the appropriate resources. In any case, it is much easier to identify what we need to learn to accomplish our objective. The benefits of learning how to manage mental energy: increased sense of security and confidence, much needed. You will develop a sense of security and confidence knowing that you can confront condition as they exist, identify what you need to learn to operate most effectively and learn it. What better way to develop a sense of security than by learning how to develop the ability to adapt to the prevailing condition to fulfill your needs satisfactorily. Okay. In the mental environment, the memories of our experiences don't change over time, but the physical environment where our goals are fulfilled does. It is constantly moving forward, offering us new condition, which in turn offer us different possibilities and opportunities if we are open to being able to perceive them. What better form of goal achievement than to be able to change our mental perspective at will, to be able to perceive these new condition in our and use our imaginations creatively to determine the most appropriate set of steps to fulfill our needs and or achieve our goals, even if we have never actually taken those steps before. For a truly successful trader, this form of thinking is essential. The possibility of the type of movement the market can display the almost like they are almost endless because of the diverse number of forces affecting it. All of us have this tendency to mentally lock ourselves into only a very limited number of those ways. And when the market doesn't conform to our preconceived mental image, we make up the difference with distortion and illusions and suffer the consequences later. Trading doesn't have to be painful and devoid of fun. We make it that way for ourselves because of our mental inflexibility and inability to adapt. So you need to have ability to adapt, right? Much needed thing in trading. Increased level of satisfactions. As long as we are alive, we'll have needs, and as long as we have needs, we're not whole the way we are. Our needs compel us to interact with the environment to achieve this state of wholeness. Growing into the state of wholeness required that we keep on learning. To keep on learning, we need to adapt. Learning is a primary function of our existence. When we fulfill this function, we are rewarded with feelings of happiness, well being, and satisfaction, all of which are byproducts of the quality of experiences with the outer environment and a function of how much we have learned. The antithesis of learning is resistance. When we resist what is being offered by the environment in the way of lessons, learning, and change, we experience stress. Okay. You're resisting something, you're resisting the learning curve of your life, and then you're resisting the success. You're delaying the success to be precise, right? We're only focused on the last outcome, but we have to go through the pathway. Stress is the opposite of the sense of well being, happiness, and excitement that we feel when we are learning. If we refuse to adapt, we shut down the learning process. The quality of our experiences deteriorates because our relationship with the outer environment deteriorates. The outer environment keeps on changing while we remain unchanged, results in less of a correspondence between what is out there and what we know. Ultimately, we end up punishing ourselves for our existence to adapt because what we experience is pain, disappointment, stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction, which are all byproducts of our lack of insights, understanding, and what we won't allow ourselves to do because of fear. Increased intuition. As you gain in your confidence to change the inside to experience a different outside, you will also increase your ability to confront difficult issues that all of us would have a tendency to avoid. Instead of confronting, we learn a number of avoidance techniques like alcohols, drugs, distortion, rationalization, or even wishing and hoping, all of which can result in painful force awareness. We eventually have to confront these issues anyway because they rarely, if ever, just go away. The longer we wait, the worse the condition usually get, making it increasingly more difficult to resolve. Right? So it's like you have to confront it sooner or later. The later you'll do it, the worse it will become. Right? Okay. Okie dokie. I hope I'm clearly visible. Okay. However, there is another less obvious problem with avoidance, especially with respect to hoping and wishing. A true intuitive impulse, a deeper level of knowledge and wisdom that will indicate the next most appropriate step to take, that will always be in our best interest, feel very much like wishing and hoping. In other words, it is very difficult to distinguish between the two, making it very easy to mix them up, which is one of the reasons why we find it so difficult to trust our intuition. The way you can know for sure that you are getting a true intuitive impulse is to clear out your mental environment, anything that would cause you to wish and hope that something will happen instead of confronting the issue head on to find out what needs to be done. You can wish and hope that the market will come back, or you can cut your loss and make yourself ready to take the next opportunity. To be able to cut your loss and be ready to take the next opportunity requires that you change anything in your mental environment that would cause you to avoid confrontation and consequently wish and hope. The less cause you have for wishing and hoping that something will happen, the more you will know that when you get the certain feeling, it is a true intuitive impulse, and the more confidence you will have to follow it. Intuition will always guide you in the most appropriate way to fulfill your needs. Just so there is no misunderstanding here. I'm not stating that there is anything inherently wrong with wishing and hoping. There are some ways in which wishing and hoping can be very useful as traders. However, we cannot afford the luxury of wishing and hoping because it puts us in a passive relationship with the market. When we wish and hope, we are shifting responsibility on to the market for making something happen instead of confronting the condition and doing something about it ourselves. If we find ourselves wishing and hoping, it is an excellent indication that we don't know what is going on, and as a result, need to get out of the markets until we do. When we step, okay, when we step through our fears to break some cycle of frustration and dissatisfaction, or change the polarity of painful memory to break a cycle of pain, we gain in wisdom because we learn all sides of an issue. Wisdom is not afraid, angry, intolerant, or prejudiced because there is a deep level of understanding, confidence, and trust, all coming from having experienced the full range of possibilities from extreme negative to increasingly greater degree of positive. If we have experienced all the negative side of a certain type of experience, we feel fear. If we have experienced only the positive, never having had a painful experience in a certain area, we won't have the particular fear. But we do develop until we do develop an intolerance or even a disdain for anyone who has had a negative experience. This intolerance stems from our own underlying fear of vulnerability. For instance, it is clear that the negative exists in the environment as a possibility. But since it has never happened to us, we either don't understand their fear or don't want to confront any information that would indicate the same possibility for a painful experience also exists for us. Anyone who has truly transcended a fear doesn't look down upon those who haven't because they don't have anything to fear. Then we step through some fear to experience other possibilities. Not only we give ourselves more choice, we also gain in wisdom. Wisdom is the byproduct that results when we retain a distinction about the nature of the environment without the negative energy or fear associated with that distinction. Wisdom is ultimately the silver lining in every dark cloud. Yes, it is. However, to gain this wisdom, we have to actively change our negatives into positive, because if we are offered a positive experience in an area where we have only experienced the negative, we don't believe it. Actually, we couldn't believe it because we wouldn't have the mental framework to accept it for what it is. The environment will be as we perceive it, and the way we perceive information and events is controlled by the energy already inside of us, unless it is a first time experience. When we don't actively work at turning our thoughts into positives, we just stay angry and afraid. It's our choice. We are only given the gift of creativity and the fear and the free will to think any way in which we choose, and we can use our thoughts to change the quality of our lives if we want to. Okay, so this was a short chapter, I think. So it's already over. So there are certain things that I have made as an insight. Like, let's just cover that up as well, and let's have a brief conversation into it. I'll stop sharing it and I'll share the PPT that I made. So that's the thing that I wrote down today. First of all, we talked about mistakes. So what are mistakes? What exactly mistakes do? They just point the way to something that we haven't learned yet and obviously need to know. Because mistakes only help us to identify where we need to work to get ahead, or like get the required success or required outcome that we wish for, right? A mistake isn't resolved until we evolve in our understanding to the point where we can garner the insight that is available from the experience, right? We cannot change or decrease the possibility of committing the same mistake until and unless we garner a new information or garner a new insight that is available from the experience that can help us to identify where we lagged and where we have to work on. We can find any number of ways to avoid acknowledging a mistake so we don't have to confront the pain. See, most of the time since the childhood, so there is this one example in this chapter itself where we said when our parents show us some kind of pain or some kind of fear to make us learn certain things or act in a certain way, we just remember that we just connected mistakes with fear and pain. So this thing, right, mistakes is connected to pain. It affected our mental framework, or I can say it nurtured our mental framework in a way that wherever we are committing any mistakes, so there is this fear of getting pain into it, and nobody wants to get the pain, right? So we can find any number of ways. That's why what we are trying to do is we are avoiding to acknowledge a mistake so that we don't have to confront the pain. And in the process, what we actually doing is we are cutting ourselves off from what we need to know to grow, expand, and improve our lives. So when we are not acknowledging a mistake, then we are cutting off the possibility to grow, expand, and improve our lives as well. So if that is the case with you, then this is what you need to do. Okay. What better ways to develop a sense of security than by learning how to develop the ability to adapt to the prevailing condition to fulfill your needs satisfactory. So yeah, you have to adapt with the environment in one way or another. Now, trading doesn't have to be painful and devoid of fun. We make it that way of for ourselves because our mental inflexibility or and inability to adapt. So I need to develop this habit of adapting, right? I have to be flexible into all the information that is present in the market. The antithesis of learning is resistance, which is like the opposite of learning is resistance. When we resist what is being offered by the environment in the way of lessons, learning, and change, we experience stress. Very recently, it happened with me. Ultimately, we end up punishing ourselves for our resistance to adapt because what we experience is pain, disappointment, stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction, which are all byproducts of lack of insight, understanding, and what we won't allow ourselves to do because of fear. Very much like summarize, it is more like a summary of a trader's life in general, right? We eventually have to confront these issues anyway because they rarely, if ever, just go away. You have to confront it because they don't go away with time, because it is energy, right? In the outer words, time heals everything, justifies, you know, but in the inner and the mental work, it doesn't justify. So you have to confront it, you have to get a way out of it. The longer you wait, the worse the condition usually get, making it increasingly more difficult to resolve. So resolve it right away, whatever the insecurities or whatever the mistakes that are there, whatever the issues that you have to confront it right away. If we find ourselves wishing and hoping, it is an excellent indication that we don't know what is going on, and as a result need to get out of the markets until we do. Wisdom is ultimately the silver lining in every dark cloud. I'm very happy that at this note I'm ending this chapter, because whatever situation that is happening with you, or whatever point you are in your life, so this is what you can get out of it. Wisdom is ultimately the silver lining in every dark cloud, and wisdom is related to growth, and it can help you to improve your future, right? So yeah, that's more about it. So thank you so much for listening up, and thank you so much, universe. Thank you so much, Radharani ji. Have a great day ahead, guys. We'll meet tomorrow with another chapter itself. We are signing off. Peace out.